One of my biggest pet peeves is the spreading of misinformation, particularly when it comes to food and cooking. And while I'm sure there are a ton of myths and misconceptions getting in the way of people's cooking, today we're going to focus on 3 meat-related myths and misconceptions that are going to help you cook better meat, make it more delicious, and hopefully a little bit more safe to eat. So let's start with one of my biggest food pet peeves, myth number 1. Sealing in meat locks in the juices. Now this is wrong on so many different levels. The idea here is that by searing the outside of a piece of meat and getting it nice and crispy and brown, you are locking in some of those juices and creating some sort of waterproof barrier. Don't get me wrong, searing a piece of meat over high heat is very important if you're looking for a nice texture on the outside and an amazing flavor that happens through the Maillard reaction, which is that browning process on the exterior of the meat. The fact of the matter is, when you subject meat to very high heats, it's going to lose moisture. Now this doesn't mean that all is lost, it just means that you need to be very aware not to overcook your meat and you'll have delicious. Which brings us to myth number 2. If you push down on a piece of meat, it stays juicier. Now this just strikes me as wrong on so many levels, but I've heard it a number of times, and even on the internet this has come up a couple of times. When you push down on a steak, or worse yet, a burger, all you're really accomplishing is squeezing out juice more so than anything else, although it does have some advantages. When I add a piece of meat to the top of a grill or a pan, I'll often push down lightly with a spatula or use some sort of meat weight or a lid to push down on that piece of meat or fish. Now this isn't to keep my meat juicy, but rather to make sure that the protein I'm cooking makes really good surface contact with the cooking surface, which leads to a nice even browning on the bottom of that piece of meat. So what I'm saying is there are merits to doing it and to pressing down on it, but if you're cooking a bunch of burgers and you just keep flipping and smushing, they might cook faster, but they're going to look a little beaten up and they're going to be a little drier, so just be aware. Which brings us to meaty misconception number 3. You need to cook your pork well done for it to be safe to eat. Now there was a point in time where certain foodborne illnesses and pathogens were a lot more common and present inside of pork, but health and safety standards and regulations in slaughterhouses and farms has increased significantly since then. If you get your pork from a good source, it is perfectly safe to cook to an internal temperature of about 63 degrees, which could still leave it looking slightly pink and really nice and juicy. The way I usually go about cooking pork, just to make sure that it's safe but it's still really nice and juicy, is if I have a pork tenderloin or a pork chop, I'll cook it to an internal temperature of 60 degrees, take it off the heat and let it rest for a good 5 minutes so that it can keep going up to those last couple degrees, but still be perfectly juicy and tender when you slice it and you come to eating it. Sorry, I just thought that you should see what was going on below the camera. But yeah, if you're looking to make your food absolutely delicious, perfectly tender, but also food safe and something that won't give you diarrhea, I would highly recommend getting a meat thermometer. Link in my bio, I'll put one of the ones that I would recommend using. But these are going to make all the difference with your meat cookery and would probably make the biggest difference in you nailing cooking temperatures time and time again. For a little bit of a bonus tip, here's something that I'm sure you can rub in a lot of people's faces. Whether you have a rare piece of meat or even a completely raw piece of meat, those red juices that flow out of it are not blood. Anybody who doesn't eat rare meat for the excuse that, hey, I don't like all that blood on the plate, that just grosses me out, it's basically mostly water with a little bit of protein going through it. But yeah, on that note, I hope that you learned something new today. I hope that you can use one of these myths and misconceptions that I've debunked to improve your cooking, and I hope to catch you in the next one. Go ahead and share this with somebody who needs to see this video so that you can prove them wrong. And if you're still watching at this point, you might as well watch another one.